They come into the world with no knowledge of anyone. We die alone, can't bring anybody with us, nor would we want to. Although we can share and receive comfort and help, no one can share our actual experiences, and we can't share theirs. And this is the way it is in cyclic existence. And this is true for every sentient being. The Buddha said that through understanding the truth of suffering, we can develop the motivation to understand the causes of suffering. And then be willing to make the effort to end the causes of suffering, so that we can be liberated from this kind of existence, and then help others be liberated as well. Now imagine that Shakyamuni Buddha comes to the crown of your head, facing the same direction as you, and dissolves into light. And that light absorbs into you through the crown of your head. Feel that you are one with Shakyamuni Buddha in the form of all-encompassing space. If we complete the path to liberation, to complete enlightenment, our existence will not be filled with dissatisfaction or uncertainty or loneliness. And we'll be totally motivated to bring others to the same state. So let's recite the 7-limb prayer on page 35, or it's on the screen. We're all plugged in now. So reverently and prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, present clowns of every type, offering actual and imagined. Declare all the negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Refuge. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So, how you doing with the book? Anybody look at the book lately? Yes, Debbie.
I'm not sure if you're up to this part, but it was about the eye, about investigating the eye,
Okay.
and this section about how if the eye can't be independent because you always say I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm this, I'm that, so it can't be separate. But then when you go to find it, you can't find it in your heart or your hand. So how do you do you just like meditate on that? Like how do you deepen that?
Okay, so it's like, yes, you do it again and again and again and again. So we're trying to, when we're looking at investigating this eye, we want to notice that if there is an eye, what is the eye? And what is the self?
Yeah.
Is it the body and mind?
Well,
If you looked for it, could you find the self in the body and mind? No, it is not that. So what is it?
an illusion.
It's a name. It's a label.
So wait,
It's, I. That's all it is. But we imbue it with a whole story, We make it much more than a label. And we have to think about this again and again, because we do exist. That's not the problem. The problem is that we grasp on this idea of I or me or self or you and other and, all those other labels, and we hold them to be permanent, independent, self, existent, self-sufficient, self-sustaining, like as if, we're not this incredibly interdependent, constantly changing event that we happen to label I, self, whatever name we've been given at birth, whatever name we got when we were ordained, whatever name we got when we got married, all these name changes, they don't mean much because they're just labels.
Did you say we're an event?
Well, essentially, we're an event that's arising every moment.
That's a great thing to do.
We're an ongoing phenomenon.
Yeah. But we try to, like I always laugh about taking pictures because it's like, oh, let's make this permanent. Take this moment, let's make it permanent. And that's what we do with ourselves. Every time we grasp at an I would never do that. We are doing that. We are kind of like we're falling for our own story that somehow we're this permanent thing that we can identify clearly. And other people should recognize it. You know me, I would never do that. How can you accuse me of that? When we have that sense of self or I that is almost tangible, we want to notice it so that we can really feel what that feels like, because that's the mistake we're making. And it's on a much subtler level usually. But every time we get upset or afraid or delighted even, we're grasping at an idea of I that doesn't exist at all. We do it in others. We grasp the self of others. Infatuation's the greatest, superimposition on other. Oh, they're perfect. Parents do it to their children when they're bragging about them, or when they're mad and then they become your children. It's the same kind of thing. It's this trying to it's sort of like we're trying to make something that is fluid, not fluid, that we can nail it. See, I knew that's what you'd say, that's what you're like, blah, blah, blah. This is what we do, we don't roll with things because we don't like uncertainty. We want predictability. We may think we like spontaneity, and yes, occasionally we like spontaneity, but overall, we want to wake up to the same world every day. And of course, how often does that happen? Never. Because it's always changing. Everything is constantly changing. And when you sit in meditation, you could quite easily see your mind is constantly changing. So it's not just your body, it's also your mind. Yes, please.
This whole idea of changing
Mhm.
and versus a desire for continuity. So the age we're living in, would you say that it is the ultimate challenge for that? Because myself and my peers, we often refer to ourselves as dinosaurs because we're looking for some of the change maybe happened slower or appears to be slower than this.
You're just old.
Than this accelerated change that's happening now.
No, that's just, you think that we're just old. They don't think it's fast because they can keep up. You know, have you ever seen how fast a kid tries to show you something on the internet and you're just kind of like, oh, wait a minute, slow down. I'll never repeat that, if you don't slow down, it's all relative. So no, it has nothing to do with anything except us grasping at, some sort of certainty. We superimpose, we really get shocked when people don't behave like we expect them to. We really get, we kind of get amused when other people expect us to act a certain way and we don't. We're kind of amused by their attitude, So, but the truth is, what we're doing is we are looking at the world as if things actually exist the way they appear. And the way they appear is pretty solid, individual, independent, I mean, we can't see the microscopic that changes, we don't look in a mirror. It takes a while before we realize. I mean, when I ordained and I saw a reflection of me in some sliding window type thing, some big window, I didn't know who it was. I mean, I literally had no idea who it was. So it just, we don't expect things to be changing. But it's because they don't look like they're changing. When you wake up and you kind of look like you did the day before, you pretty much feel the same way you did the day before, unless you've gotten a cold overnight, But I mean, it's just like, it's not this constant disruptive change, unless you're in a wildfire, an earthquake, or a flood, or a severe winter, storm, all these things that, oh, yes, they do happen, and they happen all the time around the world, So, but we hold on to not today. It's like death. Yeah, I'm going to die, but not today. Why? Why do we even think that?
It's comfortable.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, now, if we live somewhere else, we might not think that way. People who live in famine areas, areas of drought, areas of famine, areas of, war, all this kind of stuff, they kind of, they're really living with that uncertainty of the gross form. They're seeing people die all around them all the time. But I bet you anything, most of them think, yeah, I'm going to die, but not today.
Not gonna be me.
Not me, not you. So, but it's in that this is the ignorance that is obscuring us from the wisdom that sees things as they actually are.
In that sense of continuity, like you could think, oh, I like the same food when I was 10 as I like now. It almost seems.
How are those Fruit Loops?
I was thinking about Oreos, but yeah. I still like Oreos.
I still like, what do you call them? Cocoa Krispies.
Oh, yeah.
Gee, what a surprise.
Chalk.
Those are
Yeah,
great.
I know. But this is not a surprise. So I went to, I got on my pre-op, test yesterday, and my sugar was high. It's never been high. Of course, this wasn't a fasting blood test, right? So I thought, yeah, I have to admit, I've been eating a lot of sweets ever since they told me I needed surgery.
Oh, wow.
So maybe it will preclude me having surgery. But it was sort of like I got caught out, it's like, ooh, how embarrassing.
They
How'd
don't
that happen?
delay surgery for high sugar.
I know, wishful thinking. Anyway. But the thing, so it means that was a surprise, even though I know that I've done nothing but eat since the time I was told that surgery might be necessary. because, I'm not going to die today. So it's, this is our grasping. It's something that doesn't exist. And that's where all of our disturbing emotions come from. All of them. They all come, they grown in the soil of ignorance, of thinking that things exist in a permanent, independent, self-sufficient way. They're inherently existent, that there's a nature of tenderness that, does not get destroyed. Now, logically, intellectually, we can get that can't be true. Yet we still grasp after it. We still grasp the fact that, oh, I can pretty much be certain everybody I know will be alive tomorrow. Will we be correct? No. And then when you get to a certain age group, it's like a lot. It's like the diagnosis are no longer the flu, so it changes. And then that passes because they all die. And then it's just those ones with longevity, and then, they have no friends left. So, yeah. So we want to look at these things. So we want to look at the truth of suffering, the reality of suffering, as a way to be curious. Is there a way out of this? Is this necessary to suffer like this? And, if you believe in past and future lives, it's not just one little life. It's life after life after life, because our consciousnesses don't cease. They're not permanent, but they are eternal. So we're faced with just an endless series of birth and death and loss, craving, all those delights of this life. Maybe we want to find out how to end this kind of cyclic existence. You don't cease to exist. That's not the goal. The goal is to have no suffering. So when we talk about renunciation, it's about not suffering. You're renouncing suffering. So what do you have to do in order to really look at that?
Reword that.
No, because it was a terrible question. I can't even think of how to reword it. How do we get ourselves to I'm sorry, I didn't hear you
Are
quite.
you asking what's the basis for renunciation?
Well, how do we develop it? Yes, sort of a basis. Well, how can we work with the suffering that we experience, the confusion, the ignorance that we have? How can we delve deep into it so that we will actually use that information to change things?
Controlling our thoughts.
Controlling our thoughts? I'm not sure controlling our thoughts is what's necessary. It's more of really understanding what thoughts are totally useless.
Yeah. Right.
When you admit and recognize samsara is suffering, you get to the point where I've had enough.
Well, how do you get there? That's the point. Because we can all say, oh yeah, I don't like today.
You gotta find somebody who's done it.
First, well, it helps you to find some teachings that might introduce you to the possibility of it being ending. But you also have to follow the advice, like you're saying, the Dharma. But it's really about, you have to look into the Dharma deeply enough to see if you buy into it. It's, you know, because otherwise, how much time are you going to spend looking at the truth of suffering? You know,
So last night, I went to the show
right.
about Judy Garland. I
Right.
love Judy Garland. She was great, blah, blah, blah.
I mean,
And no, but then when I went home, I was saying, okay, this is not renunciation. This is doing something just for some kind of pleasure for a little while.
in samsara, yep.
A little while. So this is like, but even after the fact, I'm like, but I'm not really suffering. I mean, I did something.
So
that
this is
created
exactly the work we need to do.
pleasure, right? I did something for pleasure, but afterwards, it wasn't really suffering, but I was thinking, okay, so eventually I'm gonna want to do something that's gonna bring me pleasure again.
Of course,
So
yeah.
that's
That's the up and
That's-
down
that's the whole thing,
of cyclic existence.
right?
Is that we keep chasing these little temporary. Can you scoot over a little because your arms are
Oh, I'm
blocking the
sorry.
person behind you?
I apologize. I keep moving my chair.
Sorry. Yeah, well, you can do that, but I mean, it's just like, yeah.
My head is, I'm wrapping my head around this.
Yes, well, good luck. Yeah, I relate. But yeah, so this is the work we have to do, is we have to because there's nothing, don't do that motion. There's nothing wrong with enjoying anything. That's something, enjoyment is the result of positive past action. Nothing wrong with the ripening of virtue, okay? That's not the problem. The problem is mistaking this kind of pleasurable event as anything more than a piece of chocolate or, you know, sex or, you know, I mean, it's literally just a sensual, you know, it's of this body kind of pleasure. It's not reliable.
He is not.
Yeah, and so that's tricky, isn't it?
That, that's the problem.
Well, that's why you have to look deep, like you were doing, you know, kind of thing. Well, I'm not suffering. No, not in that moment. And this is where the third type of suffering becomes very important. And that's the
Pervasive.
all pervasive suffering of conditionality, which basically means that being born in samsara, everything about it is the nature of suffering. So yes, right now in that moment while you're enjoying a show, you're not suffering. But even in that moment, if the building collapsed on you, you'd suffer. You're not protected from suffering at all. Just because you're having a moment of enjoyment does not protect us from suffering. There's no end to the suffering part. It's like a little, you know, break from reality. You know, so I mean, it's not like that's bad. We need, you know, and in Buddha, you know, we talk about it as the power of relinquishment. You know, you have to give your mind a rest. You know, you can't just, I mean, a bodhisattva can. Amitabha Rinpoche didn't need to rest, you know, but that's because he had developed his mind enough to where he didn't find any pleasure in seeing a show. What a waste of time, you know? I mean, because that's where his mind was. The rest of us, you know, like, you know, going, okay, when's Wicked going to just show up, you know, without a charge on TV, you know? So it's this really getting that everything we do that's not getting us closer to enlightenment actually is a waste of time. It just keeps us stuck in samsara, keeps us thinking, oh, samsara is good enough some of the time. You know, it's like kind of nice. It's very seductive, da 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 da. The danger with it is how easily we just go, well, that's good enough. That's good enough. That's good enough, you know, because we have good conditions, right? So we have a lot of resources at our fingertips to be able to lighten our day, you know, tickle our taste buds.
Yeah, it seems like it almost like temporarily stops disturbing emotions and maybe extinguishes the eye, like something intense, like
Oh,
sunset or.
Really, it's not that, oh, I'm really enjoying. this. It actually heightens that sense of I am the one who's experiencing this joy. It's really tricky. And of course, when that pleasure ends, what arises? Well, dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And we go to the next one.
About that.
That's good.
So you had this wonderful musical experience, right? Which went through it was an experience. So we're all experiencing here in this realm. And there's a lot of wisdom in the American songbook. And
Whatever.
and
To get to the point.
and this is a little phrase, may just be passing fancies and in time may go. So if you hold these
Yes.
experiences that we have, the gelato you had,
Yes.
it's just, I'm having it, it's a passing fancy.
And as long as you know there's no happiness in there, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with enjoyment. The problem is we almost never stop there. The problem is we crave the next thing. It's like, oh, it's time for another show. It's time for another treat. It's time for another partner. It's time for another this and that. We're chasing our happiness in places where it's not reliable. Again, nothing wrong with having these passing fancies. The word fancy, though, is a big clue about, we fancy them. It reinforces that mind that's attracted to things that aren't going to bring us any kind of lasting anything. So it's like when we decide, like the difference between like you're in a relationship and you're working on something, there's something going on in your life that y'all are working on and all this kind of stuff. And every now and then you need to just take a break, go enjoy each other's company, enjoy something, whatever, a meal, a show, whatever. But then that's a little rest. And then you come back and continue with whatever circumstances you're trying to work with, that you're trying to, whatever it is, rebuild your house because it just burnt down to the ground. So we all need that. And that's that power of relinquishment where you take a break. But if you think that as long as you have the resources to entertain yourself in many different ways we like, because there's no end to how many things that we can enjoy. We're making the mistake that there's not something more than that. Like a relationship that enhances your life. So very few relationships survive off of just going out to dinner and going to a show and having good sex. And, there's more to it than that aspect of it. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what the Buddha is saying is there's a way to have no suffering at all. And it isn't that you end up in this boring kind of existence where you just, dulled out. It's actually a state of bliss that we can't match in sensual enjoyment, whether it's ear, sound, whether it's taste, whether it's touch.
But when you think of the word renunciation, it's like, oh, I'm giving up
Suffering.
everything.
Now you're giving up suffering. This is important. You don't use whatever you learn the word to mean in some other life. You want to use what the Buddha meant by it. You're giving up suffering.
But it doesn't seem like it because all of these pleasures of the senses and eyes and.
Can't you see how
Right.
that keeps you attached to living like this? In this kind of body that gets off on all those things? This is the trouble with sensory pleasure.
Yes.
It's addictive.
Okay, I'm gonna ask, but are we meant to transcend our physical embodiment?
Yes, we don't need this body at all. It's a result of samsara. It's a result of our disturbing emotions. The fact that our body is the nature of suffering is because it is the product of our non-virtuous actions and our ignorance.
But while we're here, we're embodied in.
Yeah, but we can leave here.
So there's the whole difference between immanence and transcendence.
I don't know what you mean by immanence and transcendence.
Well, okay,
One sounds to me like grasping at this.
well, immanence is that we're here in these bodies. I mean, everybody here in this.
Who's here in these? See, this is that I. The Buddha's just saying, no, there's no, yeah, you're stuck in this kind of body because of your past actions. They're called contaminated aggregates. Includes the mind because it's got ignorance. That's its biggest contaminated state, Transcendence, if transcendence can be equated to being liberated from samsara. Samsara is not a place. It's a mind. You no longer need this gross physical body. I mean, it's not even, you won't create the cause for it. It will not be there.
At some future time.
When you become enlightened. In the meantime, yes, this is why there's nothing wrong with enjoying. The trouble is we don't just enjoy. We get hooked. And we think happiness is somehow in that. If we can connect that okay, this is what's challenging. I'm not asking you to believe it either, but this is what's challenging. According to Buddhism, every pleasure that we experience, what's the cause for that?
Merit.
Merit.
Mm.
Desire is the antithesis of it. Desire is actually a mind of suffering. I want something that I don't have. So when we experience pleasure, it's a ripening of our past virtue. It has nothing to do with the event we're experiencing. It has to do with the conditions being met for merit to ripen. Every suffering we experience is the same thing. It is past negativity that we've done. We've met the conditions for it to ripen. It has nothing to do with the actual event. Those are conditions, but they're not the cause of you suffering. Which is why some people walked out of the trade towers, World Trade Center. They hadn't created the cause to be killed there. I mean, they didn't create the cause to be dead because they're in this kind of body. They're going to die. But they didn't meet the conditions of their death. This is hard. This is that worldview of the Buddha that's very challenging. Is we tend to think of cause and effect as being immediate. Now, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but just to pick
But
up
you
on
will.
that. So the word capriciousness comes to mind. And isn't that part of the book, what Buddha posited, that this universe that we live in is capricious?
No, it's only capricious because we create the cause for the unpredictability, all that stuff. All cause and effect is congruent. In other words, you cannot experience anything you did not create the cause for. It's not random. It's not the whim of the universe. It is simply cause and effect. If you didn't create the cause for it, you're not going to experience it. Now, we share an awful lot of similar causes, don't we? That's how we end up in the same planet with the same kind of conditions, all that kind of stuff. So this is a really challenging point. Yep.
So would it be accurate to say that we don't even know what happiness is?
Yes. Yeah, because the
Because I
kind of
think the
happiness that,
pleasure is happiness,
but it's not. It's actually the suffering of change.
We don't know what lasting happiness is. That's what.
We also don't know what, we mistake the suffering of change. That's what we call pleasure. In Buddhism, it's defined as the suffering of change. It means we go from a boring moment to a pleasant moment. Here we're sitting, we want something, so we give ourselves something that brings us something that we like. We're attracted to something that we like. If we have good resources, this is all dependent on our good resources. This is why this kind of birth is so useful to, changing our minds so we can work our way out of this kind of existence. Because when you're in when you've got negative karma ripening even though you've got a human rebirth, you don't have any conditions to be able to placate yourself with little treats, because you're in the war zone.
we do.
We do. So we don't want to waste this opportunity just on those things. Doesn't mean we don't want to make use of them. It's just that we don't want to waste our good karma on chocolate.
But didn't you say?
Please tell me it's different than that. So what? Come on, Jared, spit it out.
Yeah, I even remember now.
Well,
But didn't you say that the pleasures that we have are really the changes of suffering?
they're called the suffering of change
It's the
because
suffering of change.
the what we experience as pleasure is usually the reduction of dissatisfaction. So
you're saying just a form like this is a dissatisfaction? Like,
yes, we find it dissatisfying. There's something missing. We're always looking for something to fill that.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can.
I get that.
Yeah, that's it. So when you have good conditions, it may just be like what I suffer from is boredom. I get bored, so then I want to pick up a book and read, and just, I'm, it's just like, okay, I want something to entertain my mind with, that kind of thing. So I look for some, and I'm in a good condition, so I can find something,
But are you saying then, are we supposed to see this as what the?
Okay, so wait till I finish the story. Okay, so I'm going along now. Now I'm reading a good book, right? I'm happy. And then what happens?
The book is over.
Well, I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
Reading the book.
And it's like, oh, I gotta get up. I'm tired of sitting here. I'm tired. My eyes are tired. My da 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 da. I'm now reached dissatisfaction again.
The book gets boring.
Oh, the book is boring. Yeah. But it doesn't even have to. Even really good books, you can finally want to put it down. Now, it might be because now hunger's arisen. When I was young, it's like, how many women in here didn't eat lunch, we just,
Yeah.
and we had a weird life. Anyway, but, so, I remember jobs where I probably never ate once. I ate before the job and usually just after the job, but during the day, I held through.
I always.
It's an American. So this is, but the point is, you haven't, we're constantly like this. When I go to the beach, it's like, it's hot. So what happens? You go into the ocean. And then what happens? It's cold. And you jump out and you warm up again on the hot beach, right? And then it's hot. So you have to jump back in. This is how we spend our lives.
This is all really having to do with the body.
Mhm.
Most of this is what.
Yeah, totally. We're born in the
body.
desire realm, and guess what we do?
So What did you say about the body?
The body is the nature of suffering. It is always a condition for suffering to occur because it's fragile. It gets sick. It can easily be harmed. It gets old and it dies. There's nothing lasting about the body.
Eventually a weapon used against.
Well, that's how it feels, doesn't
Golden
it?
years, yeah, what about? It's the golden years.
Yeah, what a myth that is. So, but the golden years are referring to that, oh, now I'll have the time to indulge in all my pleasures. You know? So, and most of us, we're not, I mean, and I shouldn't throw any name out there because, of course, I don't know what their lives are like at all. But, you know, this image we have of celebrities who have lots of money and they're never going to have to worry about money, you know, and they just, I don't know, jet set around and play all the time, you know, until they decide to have children. And they might still continue to play all the time, you know, and then they have warped children. But, you know, so it's, you know, this is the thing, is that when you look at, so this is part of the investigation, you know, so you read the stories of celebrities and you go, you know, they don't sound like they're thrilled with their lives. They have momentary periods. And then, you know, a lot of them discover fame ain't great. Who was it? Somebody said, you know, that being rich is great. Fame, not so much. I've forgotten. You know, so it's just this, you know, it's getting stuff, whether it's for the body, you know, or just stuff. I don't know. It's always kind of in some way for the body. Isn't satisfying. You know. This is why we always need more stuff. And then we have to listen to George Carlin and hear all this stuff about stuff. And then we need stuff to hold the stuff in. And then it's stuff and stuff.
Right. You do that at this time.
Thinking about George.
Yeah. Synchronicity.
He was a genius.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time.
And guess what? He's dead because that's the nature of these bodies.
We can't renounce our bodies.
Well, we can renounce creating the cause to continue being born in a body that's the nature of suffering. That's becoming liberated and like beings that are liberated don't need this kind of body at all unless they want to interact with us. They have bodies of light. And you don't even have bodies of light when they're just hanging out. They only need form bodies to help others.
I've heard the term true renunciation. What does that mean?
I don't know. I'd have to read the sentence. I have no idea. Yeah, so.
So the way to renunciation is through enlightenment.
No, the way to finally be liberated, to get there, you have to have renunciation.
Say that again, please.
Renunciation is part of the path to getting to enlightenment. You can't become enlightened unless you have renunciation. Because all renunciation is renouncing suffering. So what does that mean? You renounce the causes of suffering. You try to abandon those actions and body, speech, and mind that lead to suffering.
And you're calling suffering things that I'm thinking pleasure. See, I gotta.
Not exactly.
It's not exactly like that, okay? The reason why we experience pleasure at all in samsara is because we've done good things, right? But it's still contaminated by ignorance, so that's why we're experiencing them in these forms of sensory pleasure, because we have a sensory body, and that's how we can do that. You know? And this body, it comes from our grasping at an eye. In fact, we're grasping so hard the universe is expanding. We'll get further and further apart from each other.
What do you mean?
well, we grasp at this independent, self-sufficient I.
And doesn't the United States teach that very much more than, say, some other
And
country?
guess why you're born here?
Because I'm a grasper.
Yeah, yeah. Our society reflects us. It's not the other way around. If everything that we experience, we created the cause for, every place we land, everything we experience, we've set up the conditions for that.
So renunciation, it's one of the three aspects of the path. Is that the first step in breaking the 12 links? So we don't end up with this body again?
Yeah, well, yes, it's, I mean, the first link is understanding it all.
Is renunciation or refuge?
Well, refuge helps lead you to renunciation, because refuge, don't get too, persnickety. Is that the right word? Because refuge is what means I'm going to listen to the teaching and I'm going to put them into practice. And that will lead to renunciation if you put them into practice. Now, refuge often doesn't come first. It's more like you experience, and most of us, I mean, you go into degrees of refuge, so first you think, well, this is really working for me. So you go for refuge, and you continue along, and then, you have deeper experiences of how it's working for you. And so your refuge becomes stronger, So, and then you have things that
would lead to refuge.
it all leads to renunciation,
And that
and then
implies you renunciate.
what
That makes it stronger.
what
It
does?
strengthens, the refuge strengthens your renunciation.
Yeah, refuge strengthens everything. If it's true. I don't, true. It's the opposite of what, true means, like truly existent. No, it's not that. So,
So, does Buddhism have the term for consciousness?
yeah, consciousness, that's our mind part.
Right. So, we all have the experience of watching ourselves. So that there's this part of us.
See, that's the grasping at the eye. We think there really is this part. When it's just part of them, it's just consciousness. Consciousness has the faculty of awareness. So we're aware, it knows. Well, it's not a separate thing. It's consciousness. Part of being conscious,
So when we come into our next incarnation,
Yeah.
so should we not reach nirvana, or we still have samsara? I'm throwing around the terms, and I think you know what I mean, even if I'm misusing them.
That's probably not
So-
likely.
What is it that survives?
The consciousness.
Consciousness.
But consciousness is an event. You have a moment of mind, it gives rise to the next moment of mind, it gives rise to the next moment of mind, it gives rise to the next moment. It's not a thing. Okay, it's an event. Consciousness,
They would never use the term soul.
no,
A soul does not.
soul does not. No, soul is something that's permanent, that is the nature of us, that is everlasting.
Right.
No.
So,
Consciousness is eternal, but it's this constant. It's you have your continuum of consciousness. I have my continuum of consciousness that never ceases. It never started. It never ceased. It has always
so
existed.
that's something eternal.
It's eternal, but not permanent.
Oh, dear.
I know. This is why you have to. This is why you have to learn the jargon. It's eternal, yes, but it's changing. There isn't something that you could say, oh, that was me back then. It's just a series of mental events. One gives rise to the next. Our brain has nothing to do with this process. It's non-physical. The consciousness. We have a physical aspect and we have a non-physical aspect. That's our consciousness. Okay, so consciousness is a series of events. mental events. In the terms of cause and effect, it's the same thing, that you need a mental event in order to cause the next mental event, in order to cause the next mental event. It doesn't come from something physical. So it's eternal, but it is changing. Permanent in Buddhism means unchanging from moment to moment. So it's a jargon thing.
So what is permanence then?
It's something that doesn't change.
Is there anything that doesn't?
Well, you could say that categories like the concept of label, that doesn't change. You know, it's just a label. It's a concept. It's not something that actually exists. It's just an idea that we give a name to. You know, it's hard. Emptiness is something they call permanent, but I don't want to go there because it's going to confuse you, because it's not going to make sense.
You relate consciousness to the 5 aggregates, to the 5
There are 4 of them.
I thought there were 5.
One is form. All the others are consciousness.
Okay, so
And there are
4
51 mental
4
factors.
different types of consciousness.
No.
No?
There are 4 that particularly keep us stuck in samsara. That's why they're mentioned in the 5 aggregates. Because they're particularly important to keeping us stuck, because one of them's feeling. The faculty of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, which drives our craving. Okay, one of them is discrimination, that we can tell this from that. Okay, one of them is all the other things, you know, I never can remember these names, unassociated,
Mental formation.
mental force, which is every other state of mind, you know. So, and then concepts, all that kind of thing. And then, kind of meaning just main mind.
Sorry, what?
Consciousness itself. But they're all awareness. It's all the same thing, you know. It's just that we identify sort of the container for which, you know, the facility through which all of our different states of mind, you know, arise. You know, it's like, you know, so we have, this is a whole nother course. It is, it's called Mind and Mental Factors. You know, we have every state of mind we have, it's explained that we have 5 other states of mind that accompany every single mental event we have. You know, and this is our ability, this discrimination between, you know, between this and that. Feeling, which means we have an experience of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. That's all the word feeling means in this context.
Discriminating.
I already mentioned that.
Perception.
Contact. You have to have contact with an object. So
Like the circle, the 12 links.
no, it has nothing to do with that. Study your notes. It has nothing to do with it. So, there are 51 mental factors. Obviously, there are thousands upon billions of mental factors, 84,000, I'm sure. Because I'm sure that's the number that the Buddha would, because everything's 84,000. 84,000 teachings, 84,000 afflictions, 84,000 this and that. But they have labeled certain states of mind in order to help us how to get out of samsara, you know. So there's certain ones that are virtues, and and the rest of them are not virtues, you know. They're the ones that get us in trouble, and we're trying to abandon those and strengthen the virtues. You know, one of the main things about this enjoyment of things is developing the motivation to always do something for the benefit of others. So you're developing this mental attitude of, I'm going to go enjoy this show because I need a break from, you know, my helping others, whatever it is, you know. And then you recognize, I'm rested now. I will go back to helping others. So that you're doing everything with that motivation. And it can be as vague, you know, as just benefiting others, but it can also be as vague as, you know, I need a break to be able to sustain myself on this commitment to becoming enlightened for the benefit of others. And then there's certain things you would go, but I'm not gonna go practice at the shooting range because that's not a good plan. We shouldn't get familiar with the use of weapons. We shouldn't practice weapons because this is not good for the habits of mind. We don't want to ever be attracted to weapons. You know, so if we have that attraction, we want to abandon it. So we wouldn't fuel it by making that our activity for resting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, this gives back to our motivation, you know, like I'm trying to develop a mind that can, you know, liberate myself from cyclic existence so I can help others to also discover that we're not stuck in this suffering state. That it's a mental, you know, that everything that we're experiencing is a result of our actions of body, speech, and mind. We clean up our actions of body, speech, and mind, we're not going to have wars. We're not going to have famines. We're not going to have those things. You know. But we have to do it ourselves, unfortunately. Because Buddhists would have just said, you know, put us in the washing machine and hung us up and said, let go of that. But they can't do it. We all individually have to take charge of our minds and our actions and go, okay, that's not a, you know, I'm going to quit doing that. That's not a good action. That's just going to lead to suffering. And so how do we know if something leads to suffering? Well, we study. Like we thought, oh yeah, I can see how feeding, you know, attraction to weapons might not be a good habit to keep going. Because if I'm born in a, you know, I don't know, a neighborhood that thinks gangs are great, you know, if, you know, being attracted to weapons might get me killed, or I might kill someone else sooner, you know, making this up. Okay, so now if you like to hunt, you're creating the cause to end up in a war zone. You know, first you go to hell and then you get in the war zone.
Wow.
Well, it's about harm.
Yeah. I get
No one wants to be killed,
it.
you know. So all those cockroaches I've killed in the past,
Oh, boy. Trouble,
trouble.
trouble.
Yep.
Big trouble in Little City.
Yep,
Can I ask you something?
I think so.
I think you said.
They count, huh?
Hmm.
I think you said something before about the seeds of consciousness. That,
I don't recall saying anything about the seeds of
I
consciousness.
don't know, then maybe I didn't hear you right, I'm
The
sorry.
mental continuum.
No, because, no, but
If you read in the book that, you know, they sometimes talk about karmic seeds being placed on your mind stream. Like I love this one. Our mind is like the baggage car of a railway train. It goes from place to place and life to life, collecting parcels of karma that must someday be delivered and paid for. Yeah, that's in the book. It's in the book. It's in the chapter, How We Create Karma, Samsara.
what chapter is that?
I don't know.
Is it in the beginning of the book, the end of the book?
Oh,
I'm
you'll
almost at
find
the
it.
End of the book, and I don't remember reading that
You
section.
mean you haven't memorized the whole text and you just think you should just remember it like that? I don't think so.
I know, but that's
Yeah.
a statement.
Did you have a question?
No, no.
No, she does. Yeah.
So,
Whose name I've forgotten.
Jean,
Jean, thank you.
so there's a lot of mounting accounts of what are called near-death experiences.
Yeah.
NDE. In fact, there are archives now that are being
Yeah.
developed at universities.
Yeah, I know. There's-
And there's a lot of common elements that are mentioned.
Yeah.
So these people who have had it and pop out of their bodies, as they say, and are able to observe this till they go on some kind of journey. One of the things that seem to be consistent are they're bathed in an experience of love that transcends anything, even if they're a parent.
Yeah. I've read them too.
Yeah, nothing like that. that, and also given a choice to come back because they wrote a contract. And the contract has yet, I mean, it's not like.
Who they wrote the contract to?
Hmm?
Who did they write a contract to?
Well, they decide them, the
Yeah, you see,
the soul decide.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's based on their belief system. We would just explain that what they're experiencing is a projection from their belief system. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, so that's why they talk in terms of that. It doesn't mean that that's actually how it is, but that's their experience of it because they've created the cause to have that kind of experience. Like I can imagine Jimmy Carter having that kind of experience because of his, devotion to his path, so that, and he was, to me, in my mind, he was a very virtuous person. And so he would have this, kind of experience. I don't know what they teach in his church or about the death experience, but I think that the similarities of experiences are partly because we have similar karma to be born in a similar place with similar activities, similar religions, similar all this kind of stuff. That it doesn't mean that how they're interpreting it is somehow going to be true for everybody or something. I mean, I think it's just a projection of the mind because the mind continues through all this process.
yes. So maybe I was mistaken by saying contract. What it was is, and they're also, it's not your time, but many of them come back with altered abilities.
Yeah, of course, because the
Scientific
mind is, when you're in the bardo, according to Buddhism, when you die and you go into the intermediate state before you find your next body for your next life, you could go through walls. Your body's not so solid. You can travel large distances. You can, you're not bound by the same kind of gravity problem we have here, because you're no longer in this kind of body. You don't have choice over your future life. That's been determined by the moment of death in terms of what seed ripens, okay? What karmic seed ripens. So it's no different. I would think that somebody who has a near death experience means it isn't their time. They have life expectancy left. According to Buddhism, whatever seed ripens, for at the moment of death for your next life has a life expectancy in it. You can die young, early, before that life expectancy, and then you'll have a short life in the future when that leftover life gets lived. This is very complicated. So it's not in Buddhism, we wouldn't say anything's talking to you saying, oh, it's not your time, go back. You just wouldn't die because you haven't met the conditions for death yet. But you could get very close, as many people do, especially the more technology we have. But okay, I don't know if this example is a good metaphor or a good example. Like my father had Alzheimer's, right? So they're even pretty far advanced. There would be days, or not days, that's an exaggeration, moments where he could remember everything. So clearly his brain was damaged, but his mind wasn't. So since the brain was not functioning, he could rarely retrieve that, it just wasn't available to him. When Jill Bolt, remember her, the one who had the stroke, she said that when what was it? Her left side of her brain shut down. I think it was her left, because the right side's Jill Bowden. She's a
Yeah, the
she's a
left side,
neuroscience. Yep. So her left side of it, she had a stroke, and she was a neuroscience. She's kind of going, oh, I must be
I
having
know
a
it's
stroke.
happening.
So, but she said when her left side quit supporting her consciousness, she had this feeling of bliss, of being totally connected to everything. And it was only when that part of that side of her brain started to come back, she didn't want to come back because it was such a delightful experience. To me, that's an example of the crap we create in our minds of our stories, where all our disturbing emotions arise, all that kind of stuff. If we would get in touch with our Buddha nature, this capacity for universal love and compassion and kindness, all those good things, I imagine that would be a state of bliss, which is why I'm not worried about enlightenment being boring.
Yeah.
But so, if you're temporarily have that experience, you're gonna, you might be able to learn from that. She learned from that. She was able to use that experience in her understanding of how things actually are. So I would think near death would do the same. Because our barriers, because it's said that our mind being non-physical, we think it's bound by this body because that's our ignorance. But the mind isn't bound that way. So if you have an experience that lets you, out of that experience of being bound by this body, I would think that you would, and you also, I mean, you can create the cause for having those experiences by past lives of, like being a yogi in a past life where you really able to have different levels of consciousness arise, and you didn't work on it so much in this life, but it's available to you through something like the near-death experience. I don't know. I mean, I just think that it's the fact that they're similar doesn't, most of our lives are similar. I just don't think that means that's actually how it is. It's how we would interpret it and how we would describe it, because that's the terms we've got.
The mind comes back with some capacity that was freed
Yeah.
during that. Yeah, the best metaphor I ever heard was like a radio. If you turn on a radio and you hear Beethoven's Ninth, the symphony isn't in the
Right.
radio. And then you turn it and you hear the Grateful
Something
Dead.
else. Yeah.
It's just a receptor
Right.
for those things. And
Right.
that's the mind.
Yeah.
So that it's the nature of that kind of an experience that opens something up, like it did for Jill Bolton.
Right.
Or these people who all of a sudden have clairvoyance,
Right.
clairaudience.
And those kinds of skills, they're called siddhis in Sanskrit, I guess. They're accomplishments, mental accomplishments are something that through concentration, developing your concentration, developing, these, what they call absorptions, meditative states that are absorbed, you develop those skills, of clairvoyance, of being able to see things that are very far away. In your mind, you're just, you're able to go there, and this is what, so as we develop our skills of mind, of concentration, doors are open to us. And then, we're reborn and we don't remember them and but we may have an experience that, or karma ripens and we're in a condition to kind of like use that skill again, and the opportunities there. Yeah, that's pretty wild. I Grandpa here.
I believe in the past you've talked about the bardo, the intermediate state, and what the sensations are like. So can you review that?
Not in the time we have, but
how much time?
That's
a whole other class now.
Well, it depends on, and it also depends on what kind of rebirth you're going to have. But yes, we talked about the dissolutions, because one of the things as you die, your physical body is no longer supporting your consciousness in the same way. And so things start to shut down. All our sense consciousnesses, our ability to see, our sense, our eye consciousness, our ear consciousness, our hearing consciousness. Those are all types of consciousness that are dependent on the body. So those cease because the body dies or is no longer functioning. And then after that happens, then you have your gross minds, your consciousness, it's not like a thing. This is very hard to, it's a non-physical thing, but all our stories, all our mental factors, all these little, greed and they get absorbed, and your mind gets more and more subtle. And then at the time of death, the most subtle mind is what leaves this body to go find a new one. So it's not, people who, reach high levels of concentration can remember their past lives, they have access to them, so it's not like we ever lose this information. We haven't created the cause to remember them. So that's why the Buddha said he couldn't find a beginning because he could never find a first light, because he could just go back and oh, there's another one before that. It's pretty wild.
Very.
I've tweaked my neck. That's why I'm doing all this silly number. But it's fun though, isn't it?
You do.
I love talking about this stuff because it's a lot to take in, and you're not going to buy it all because we're taught completely different things, and trying to find the how to make sense of it when you're coming from a different angle, like this idea of past and future lives. When I first met Buddhism, it was like, yeah, whatever. Well, it wasn't until we talked about cause and effect and the fact that the mind's not physical, and so it can't arise from the brain because it's not a congruent cause. They don't match. It has to have come from a previous moment of mind. Now, you don't have to buy that. You can say it's just all mind. I mean, that's what a lot of scientists do. They say it's got to be just the brain, But there are too many things that seem to put that into question. So, but I don't have proof of that. Neither do they. So, there we go. So we want to think about our motivation in the beginning, about wanting to benefit all sentient beings. So we're doing this study for that, exploring possibilities. And wouldn't it be nice to end suffering? Oh, I'd love to end suffering right now. Oh, man. So, hi, Lou. This. So we want to dedicate did Lou come on and wave?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, good to see you. She's in South America.
Giving you a heart.
Giving you a heart.
Oh, heart right back. And Esther's, these people are all in different countries.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
except Elaine. I don't think Elaine's in different countries, but Nana's in Portugal and Lou's in,
It's 1:30 in the morning right now.
yeah, something,
Yes,
Like
Wow.
1 or 2 in the morning.
that's very late.
or very early. So we want to take all our positive potentials that we created, all the positive seeds we place in our mind stream that can ripen in some sort of happiness in the future, sort of pleasure, resources. See, when we're looking into the Dharma, that creates, the cause to meet resources, spiritual resources in the future. So, yay. So, We want to make sure that we're not greedy with it. We want to keep in mind that we're doing this so that we can get everybody out of samsara. All right. It's on page 235, Roy. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of Guru Buddhas and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but is increased more and more. So that supreme jewel bodhicitta is this idea that that mind that wants to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, and once you have that mind, everything gets easier because, you know, it just like now, ignorance influences everything. Our confusion about what, you know, influences everything. When you develop the mind of bodhicitta, it influences every mental event that you have. So it makes it much easier. Okay. Just as the brave Manjushri, that Bhatra 2, realize things as they are, I to dedicate all these merits in the best way that we may follow their perfect example. Okay, here's what I want. Because of all the merits of the 3 times created by us and all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings, may there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. Dharma in this meaning is truth. You know, whatever leads to happiness, the truth of the path to happiness. So it's not limited to Buddhism or something. It's what leads us to true happiness. May everyone have perfect conditions and have only compassion and love for each other in their mind streams. And may they only benefit and never harm each other. Okay. Page 244, I think. The long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, 234 in the book. Okay. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, or the armor of patience that's never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So, why don't you end the recording? Thank you. So, I'm going to have surgery 2 weeks from yesterday. So that's a Wednesday.